so that they understand
Mhm.
why it's important for men to know certain things that I was teaching my son.
All right. Things and welcome, Francisca Mandeya. I have the privilege of getting to know you for a couple of years now, since I landed in Canada, and it's been a pleasure having you also as my mentor in a way. So today, I want to have a conversation with you about, your experiences being in Canada, in terms of issues to do with money, personal finance, and even your story as an author, transformational coach. You have a lot of accolades. So I have so much respect for you. So to get started, I am going to allow you to introduce yourself. Thank you so much.
I wish I'd known you'd say that. Thank you for having me, Isaac. So,
No problem.
normally when I introduce myself, I play my mbira and I tell people who I am, I greet them, but let's just do the
Yes.
ordinary introduction.
Okay.
Francesca, people call me now Francesca Mandeya. Chuma is my husband's name. I am a grandmother.
Yes.
I am a mother. I am a wife. I am an aunt, niece,
Wonderful.
sister, friend. I am a transformational coach, mental fitness trainer, author, speaker, mbira player. I am a lot, but I'm so grateful that all these identities, these hats that I wear are all linked somehow to my social justice ministry. I have been recognized
Yes.
as an award-winning social justice advocate in the territory of Nunavut by Black History Society. And it humbled me to know that even away from home, what I do is being seen, heard, and valued. I would like to end here with this introduction for now.
Thank you. Thank you so much for such an introduction. I hope maybe in the future I will probably bring you back with your permission, of course, and play us a bit of mbira, because it's one of the instruments that, it's an identity, part of the identity of being a Zimbabwean. So for background,
Yeah.
Francisca and myself, we originally hailed from Zimbabwe, and even though now we are currently living in Canada. I'm currently based in British Columbia, and you are based in Nunavut. Now, a lot of youngsters and other people around the world, they wonder to say, they ask me questions like, what has been your experience been like in Canada? First of all, what has it been like, living in Canada over the past couple of years or even decades now for you? How has been that experience been for you?
Wow. I've been in Nunavut for 10 years, and that's the only place I've called home in Canada. The experience has been amazing. It has been life-giving. It has been transformational on my part. I have grown so much since the time I decided it was time to leave Zimbabwe and start a new leaf in my life. I have become the woman I am today because I made the choice to leave a place that I loved and I still love, Zimbabwe, in search for peace, in search for opportunities to be able to give better life to my children and stability in my own life, socially, economically, politically. I needed to be stable and to be able to do all the things that I think God created me to do. I've become a coach. I've become an author. I've become a speaker. I was not all these things before I left home. So when I think of Canada and the opportunity that it offered me, it continues to offer me, I sit here in gratitude because I don't think I could ever have been able to send my son to aviation school, to help my daughters finish their university and support them through all their dreams. It is because of Canada, specifically Nunavut, that I've been able to do all these things, for which I'm grateful.
Yeah. This is a very beautiful story because, I also have my mom. I'm so grateful and indebted to her because as much as my dad as well, supported me, they sacrificed a lot. So to then hear that you have been able to support your son to become a pilot, right now he's, flying and traveling around the world, and also your daughters, being able to complete their education. So that brings me to another interesting point, the power of education. Because for me, when I look at myself right now, without education, I'm sure my story would have been different. You are a published author just like myself as well. So how has that experience been like? What is it like? Someone might be wondering, how is it like to write a book? And is it all that easy? Are you now have you made millions out of it? Because I think from my own experience, but today it's an opportunity for you to talk. I thought, well, if I write the book, I'm going to be, probably a millionaire. So you may want
Yes.
to speak to that experience.
Writing has always been my go-to,
Yes.
especially when I want to process difficult emotions. I actually started way younger than I acknowledged before. But I found out that if I had something that is heavy in my heart, I'd either write a poem or write what happened or write to the person that I'm angry with or emotional about and maybe not send it. So
Okay.
writing in general for me is a tool to heal myself. When I decided to write my book in 20 years, it's therapeutic. When I decided to write my first book in 2018, it was after many attempts to write a book because I just felt like I want to write my story. At that time when I was still in Zimbabwe, I wanted to pack everything in one book because my story is just like, I need to write it. I need to get it out. So that need had always been there, but I even attempted to give a script to somebody and they said, Francesca, focus on your political writing. I think that's what you're good at. This novel thing, no, forget about it. And I was so heartbroken because I didn't get any constructive feedback except that I wasn't meant to be an author. Fast forward 2018, when I turned 48, the age my mother died.
Yeah.
That's when the switch clicked. I asked myself, what legacy am I going to leave? At 48, what legacy did my mother leave? And did she do everything that she meant to do? So that was the trigger for me. One, I was grieving for my mom and realizing at 48 that she died young because I didn't feel old. And then two, I was scared for my own mortality that I could actually die. And I wanted to make sure that when I die, I want to leave something. And so I went back into my story and my mother's story. When she birthed me, she called me Ndaisiwe. Had I known. That was a statement of regret, a statement made out of pain. And I wondered, what was that woman who was my mother's story? And then I realized because I was a girl child born number 3 in a succession of girls, my mother was expected to produce a boy and she failed. And I was her failure.
That was in Zimbabwe,
and so,
right?
Yes. I felt my mother's pain. And I was like, this is why I'm so charged about gender issues. Now, only when I was reflecting, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is what it felt for my mom. She must have had postpartum depression, processing that she failed again, So from there, I began to understand a lot of things about my life and all the injustices that women face because they are born girls. So then I said, okay, based on this story, that's my mother's story. How can I change it to something that's positive? So I reframed Ndaisiwe and I said, I'm my mother's voice against patriarchy because she was speaking by naming me. And so for me, the answer that came in my head and my heart was, make sure you talk about your story to your son so that you heal that cycle. Your mother was articulating a pain from patriarchy. You are the one that's going to heal that pain and make sure that in your family, you leave a legacy of equality, love, and freedom. So that's how Mother Behold Thy Son was birthed, from that deep pain of losing my mom and grieving it and realizing at 48 she died young. What was her story? And how is it linked to my story? and what I've always advocated for, which is equality, among other things, gender equality. And so that was the joy that I got from having this aha at a milestone in my life that was linked to my grief and my fear of death. That was beautiful. And I got the energy, and I hired a coach. I couldn't do it by myself because remember, I was told that I couldn't do it by myself. So I hired a coach who was experienced in speaking, experienced in writing, and I let her lead me. I let her lead me. And so I was teachable and coachable, and I followed the steps until I birthed my book a year later. And even went for her speaking conference in California. I invested a lot of money. I invested a lot of emotion. It's not easy to write about your story like that. It's like lifting the armpit. You know, when people ask you, why are you talking about that? How dare you talk about gender equality and expose your family? It comes with all that backlash. But for me, I was convinced that I want to heal myself by telling my story. And I know that my story, once it goes out there, it's no longer about me. There are a lot of girls and women who are experiencing this inequality in their own families. They are getting pain from their own families. And if we don't talk about it, then who will? At the same time, my son, I only have one birth son. I didn't want him to be like the boys and men that abused me in secondary school, in primary school. And even in my relationships with the opposite sex, I wanted my son to learn from my story so that he also corrects certain scripts and becomes a man of integrity, confidence, and conviction, and treats women with respect. Writing, you asked me, writing a book, not just about me making money. It was about putting my story out there, daring to be visible, vulnerable, and authentic, and be of use. But of course, I hoped to make money. And let me tell you, a book. I had been warned by my coach that a book is an expensive business card. You don't make money from book sales unless you hit the jackpot on Amazon. Yes. So you don't make money from writing a book unless you have a good book deal and a massive marketing strategy for you to be making those millions. So for me, I learned that you can create a lot of products based on your book, which is what I'm doing now. I've just finished recording Mother Behold Thy Son and I'm going to post it on Audible for more people to have access to it, because some people don't want to read books, they want to listen to books. And then I use it for my coaching programs, especially when I do the Mentally Fit Father. I ask them to buy that book and read so that they understand why it's important for men to know certain things that I was teaching my son. So when I teach my son, it's not just my son by birth, it's also other sons by extension. So now I use it in my coaching as a teaching aid when I talk about healthy masculinity and becoming a mentally fit father. Yes.
So this is very interesting. So I'm now curious because, as an author as well, I've kind of stumbled upon, some of those challenges that you mentioned. Now, having lived in Canada for quite some time, do you want to share a little bit more about your personal finance story? What have you learned about, issues to do with credit card debts and finance? How is that, to the extent that you are comfortable, just share it with the audience?
Okay, so right now, as I speak to you, I'm looking at my vision board that I made in 2017. And one of the things that is below the life coach is a picture of marshmallow getting toasted. In Canada, they have a culture of toasting marshmallow over a bonfire. So it's that concept where there's a marshmallow on a stick and it's getting toasted. But below the marshmallow, they are credit cards. I put it there specifically so that I would remind myself that I need to deal with debt and be in control and toast the credit cards. Yes. I got into debt to educate my child. So I do not have any regret at all, because there was no way I would have cash to send my child for aviation school, especially. So that was worthwhile. I know why I got into debt. And then the other debt that I have incurred is for things that I could pay for to create memories in my life that are worth more than money. So I'm working towards being comfortable with money such that I'm not scared to borrow, but I'm also not careless enough to get myself under the average credit score. So what I've noticed is it's credit cards, because we come from a country where there are no credit cards. At least when I left Zimbabwe, I didn't have one. It was cash.
Yes.
So when you
Same with
come
me.
here, you get credit card, you get a big limit and you get excited. If you're a shopaholic, you're going to shop until you drop dead. Thank God I do not find myself in that category where I do shopping therapy or crazy shopping, but I've spent way more than maybe I can say I can afford. Money is math. Math is money. If you are going to spend, make sure you know where it's coming from and that you can service that debt. And it doesn't give you a headache or a stomach ache. If it begins to give you a headache or a stomach ache, it means that you're obviously spending more than you should. And, so my personal experience is I get to zero out my credit card and I celebrate. And then something comes up and then it shoots. But I always have a plan to say, okay, I'm here. I don't regret these expenses, but I'm going to put a stop now. I'm going to prioritize. So I do the math and then I deal with my credit card or any other credit so that I remain in good standing. And this is a lesson that I've been trying to teach my son as well. We haven't been perfect, but one must have tools to help them see the money coming in and the money going out.
Basically the budget, because sorry to interject. I think you raise a very important point, because once you have a budget, it gives you a picture of the money that is coming in and that is coming out, and to an extent you can potentially see areas that you are overspending, right? You can kind of see, so maybe take action with regards to that. No, that's interesting, because I had the same experience. Now, moving on, thank you so much for sharing this. I often
have something
say,
else.
Please go ahead. Yes.
There was a time when we got into a group with my sisters. My sister in America was like our coach, our money coach. So we talked about debt snowball. So when you are attacking debt, start with the one with the highest interest, and then pay that off first because it costs you more, and then go for the second one and go for the third one. So we were actually in an accountability group. Our sister was like the coach, and we would report every month, have we done it? So just as we need our coach for the mental muscles, you need a money coach. If you cannot help yourself, you need somebody to remind you, have you done what you said you would do? Have you paid your debt? If you can't do it by yourself, because we are humans, we have weaknesses, find a coach that will hold you accountable, or a group of people, like-minded people with the same goals, that will help you deal with your credit and make sure you keep your promises. I'm complete there.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing. You know what I tell, I coach people. I don't advise people specifically to say invest in this and that. But I kind of like, coach, as a coach, you understand, right? A coach teaches you, right? So one thing that I always tell, my clients is to say, number one, I think Dave Ramsey mentioned this a lot. He says, make sure that you at least have $1,000, for example, to have as an emergency fund. That way you then don't default, like using credit card, because the interest rate can be as high as 22% or even above that. And then you start to attack, the snowball method. Like you said, you start with the highest interest. Some people, they prefer to start with the one with small, regardless of interest. So then they score those small wins. Say, this $300, you pay it off. Then you say, well, that's a win. And then you go to the bigger one. But I think at the end of the day, there's no one, size fits all. So this is very interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that. And then In terms of your experience, if you have worked for, for the government of Canada, there might be someone who may be saying, okay, how has been your experience, getting a job in the federal or provincial government of Canada? Is it that easy?
I think where I live, the biggest employer is the government. For me, it wasn't that
Okay.
difficult to get a job with government because it's the territorial government, not the federal.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
yeah. So I can't say much as a public servant because I
Yes.
do not have the
Yes, for
authority
sure.
to talk about government. But in
Sure.
terms of employment, I'm very grateful that I happen to work for a government. I work in a division where I'm actually dealing with issues to do with poverty, and therefore it's very much aligned to my values of social justice. And I must say that I'm very grateful that I also live in a government subsidized home. So I'm very grateful because then it gives me the opportunity to actually save and make cost savings compared to other people who don't have the same privileges as I do. So for that, I'm very grateful to Nunavut. Yes.
Thanks for sharing. And in Canada, there are different provinces and territories. So I think that's something that is very interesting because the cost of living is different across, regions, territories, and provinces. So that's very interesting. I think for me, it's one of those things that I would want, if I get an opportunity, I would want to, work for the government if an opportunity arises. So thank you for sharing that with me.
You are very welcome.
Thank you so much for the inspiration. Now, is there anything else that you like to share? I think you mentioned you have one book that you wrote. Do you have another book so that at least maybe some of the audience may be curious to find out more about your books and your story? Do you want to share that with the audience?
Okay, so I wrote my second book in 2021 and published it in January 2022. Remember, I said I had a whole script, which was 70,000, thank you, 70,000 words, and I had to split that script into multiple books. So one of the things that I wanted to write about was about race. And I got inspired to write about race because when I got to Canada, I didn't know that I actually should be walking around carrying a label called black. Because when I was in Zimbabwe, I was just me. I didn't have a color code. I didn't have to comply and fit in a box which is a color. So I got here and I found out it's really in my face. I'm in the minority and I have to swallow the black label, even though I don't agree. I think you can agree with me that if we take a look at our screens right now, and if we point black, I'll point black. This is black, but if I put it against my skin is brown, and that is black. But this is how I came face to face with race and racism, where I am forced to comply and fit into a box, which I don't agree with. Even though my fellow Zimbabweans and other Africans are okay with being called black, I was not. And I felt that it was being rubbed in my face. And I would speak up in African spaces and say, I'm not black. And they would look at me funny. I would also get called nigger by 8-year-olds. I don't know who teaches young children that other human beings, you give them names like that. So, I mean, it was beginning to just get a little bit too much for me. And the treatment at work also, which I cannot fully disclose, but there is definitely systemic racism in our workplaces, and it hits us hard. Because before we do anything, before we say anything, as people of African descent, people already perceive us at the bottom. That's the order. That's what society has taught people. Black people belong to the bottom rank of the race ladder, and we feel it in how we are treated, in how we are called names, in how we are told that we don't know anything in the workplace, even if we have master's degrees, we've gone through British colonial, and we know our stuff. We are told that we don't know anything. So I have experienced that. And also, I had a story before I came to Canada, liberation struggle, and how I was a witness of violent brutalization of my parents by British soldiers. When we were children, we witnessed them. beating up our
Yes,
parents
in
in
Zimbabwe, right?
sending them to prison, and also full combat happening overnight with bullets dropping on our roof. So I can safely tell you that my first decade was tainted by war. And so I think we have a lot of trauma. We just don't put words to the experience that we have had as Africans, but we've lived with a lot of colonial trauma, intergenerational trauma that our parents and our ancestors experienced. So all that, I think it was screaming for attention. And I needed to understand why those British soldiers were beating my parents, why we were treated as less, why we are poor on our own soil, why we are Christians and we believe these things that came by force and brutality. So that's what prompted me to write Searching for Racial Equality. And I was trying to make meaning of my childhood, meaning of how Christianity came to Africa, meaning of how the world has decided that we belong to the bottom rung. We saw the anti-Black racism during COVID in China. We saw anti-Black racism when the war broke out in Ukraine. Publicly, people treating us unashamedly unequal. And that, for me, was like, I'm searching for racial equality because I believe that we are equal human beings with equal human rights who deserve equal treatment, but it's not happening. And I want to tackle that, to heal myself first, to be at peace with myself. So I've always talked about being mentally fit and taking any adversity, any pain or trauma, and turning it into gifts. Because if we don't do that, we won't heal. No one is going to do that work for us. So writing the book for me, like I told you, writing for me is therapy. So first, selfishly, it's for me. But then I know that as I tell my story, someone is going to resonate. So it's for them too. And also the way I wrote it was such that I don't hate the people that have privilege, because we were all not there when these systems were created. But I hate how we have perpetuated the systems, knowing that it's unjust. Kept the same systems, knowing that it oppresses other people. So for me, I always write and put ideas forward, recommendations for the government here in Canada, so that it really pays attention to anti-Black racism and listens to our grievances as a people who have made Canada home. I'm now a citizen, and so I believe I have rights, and I have to voice my concerns. And also make recommendations to the United Nations that the way it's crafted is such that it's full of people that have power, that have always been power holders. But where is Africa? Where is our voice in there? The systems were created to oppress us, and we still have those same oppressive systems trying to moderate issues to do with conflict in the world, and yet we don't have full representation. And that racism trickles through all those global institutions of democracy. So for me, I was just voicing it out and making recommendations, even for a DG, Sustainable Development Goal, a separate one for racial equality. Because if we have an SDG for gender equality, for me, gender is secondary. In the first place, I'm African. So race comes number one. Why don't we have an SDG for race?
Interesting.
Because my race intersects with my gender to give me underprivilege. So if you are going to come to me and say SDG, is it SDG 3, gender equality? I'm like, but why don't we have one for racial equality? Because that's the more pervasive, that's the more painful for me. So why don't we have one? Because then when you have it as a global goal, it means the global eyes are focused on gender. Why don't we focus our eyes globally on race? So those are the questions that I had.
Yes, I'm learning a lot. I'm learning a lot from you, and I wish we had more time. But I'm going to also allow you to, just probably, if you like, if you will, conclude by sharing, like what you like to share to the audience, to say if there is a young girl who wants to achieve something in life, who wants to become, whoever they want to be, right? What can you say, and what has life taught you, that you can impart to them in conclusion?
Okay, life has taught me that as a girl child, you are an equal human being with equal human rights, deserving equal treatment. You are enough. You are worthy. Don't make a man your plan for life. Stand on your own feet, because I had to stand on my own feet as a single mother. Don't make pregnancy a plan. Pregnancy is not a plan. Don't become a mother when you are not mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, and financially fit and ready for motherhood. You can never turn back to being a girl once you become pregnant and consequently become a mother. It's a whole job description. It's a lifetime commitment. I say so because I was a student mom and I had it hard. But I'm also happy that I made a decision to keep my children, even though I was a young mom. So to the young girl, focus on your dream. Believe in your dream. Don't hinge your dream on another human being's life, especially a boy or a man's life. You are an individual entity who is capable of making her dreams come true. State what your dream is. I said I have a vision board. State what your dream is. Write it down, even though it may be bigger than you can imagine, and people may be laughing at you. Just believe in that dream and go for it.